What's going on, guys? Zombie Wars here, and welcome back again to another video. Today we're going to be covering the Five Nights at Freddy's X Dead by Daylight collab yet again in this video. Before we get to this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new to the channel. I cover a lot of DBD news, speculation, and more, and I'd love to see some new faces on the channel. In this video, I wanted to discuss the potential for legendary skins for this chapter and even ranking them. This was actually my first video I made on the subject of FNAF X DBD, and I wanted to revisit the topic now that we know who the killer is going to be, as well as some information regarding Springtrap's power, primarily that he'll most likely have survivors use camera and security doors against him. So today we're going to be going over the skins that could come with this chapter, specifically ones I think have the highest likelihood of joining Springtrap in the fog. In this video, we're only going to be covering the legendary skins and not like regular cosmetics for Springtrap, so pretty much anything that would require a full model and animation change to be featured on this list. There's a lot of possibilities I think Springtrap could get for skins, so if you guys would like to see a separate video on that, let me know down below. So since making my last video, we got official confirmation that we'll be receiving legendaries with Springtrap. We even see this with Matthew Lillard's Yellow Rabbit skin. In addition to this, we also know that some of them will have visceral Moris, meaning that they'll come with unique animations with their Mori, exclusive from the regular Springtrap Mori, whatever that would be. We also know that there are terms set by Scott Cawthon when it comes to this chapter on what can be skins and what behavior can do with these legendary skins, which writes off actually a lot of characters. The two primary boundaries set for this chapter when it comes to skins is that they must fit the character and not do anything the character would not do. Now, I'm not entirely sure if Scott means he doesn't want legendary skins on a character that features an ability the character doesn't originally have, such as like the Mimic as the Singularity, or just the belief that he wouldn't want skins on a character that does something they otherwise wouldn't do, even if they had the ability to do so. For the sake of this video, I'm going to go with the latter. The second boundary was actually stated in a Dawko anniversary livestream, but the second boundary is that the missing children are not supposed to be represented as evil. Although in the world of DBD, it's not a requirement to be evil as a killer, as there are many killers in the game that aren't evil, I would still assume that this is something that Scott would most likely be opposed to. We also know from interviews that the main animatronics came up during discussions before Springtrap, and were ultimately written off for Springtrap, likely with this reasoning being a contributing factor to this. So we can immediately write off any of the animatronics from the first game. Also, they're featured as props on the map, so it's unlikely they'll be playable for that reason anyways. They're in the fog already, just not as killers, which I think is actually a really nice way of including them while sticking to that rule. But with those rules in mind, what can we add into the realm of Dead by Daylight? Well, quite a lot it seems, and I even have some new suggestions for my original video. So let's go over them, and let's start off with some of the ones I think that we'll definitely get. So the first one I wanted to discuss is a personal favorite of mine, and that being the Yellow Rabbit from Into the Pit. I think this one is a high contender to being a skin due to his popularity with the series, branching out from being a book character into its own game. The Thing from Into the Pit books has grown to become a fan favorite of the series, turning the Yellow Rabbit suit that William wears into this like monster, and there's also a lot of mystery surrounding the origins of this monster as well. This version of the rabbit I think would be more monstrous and rapid than Springtrap normally is, and would definitely be a cool addition as a legendary skin. There's actually even some references in the map that we know of to the Into the Pit books. The map features a blocked off ball pit with a suspicious amount of blood surrounding it. As for who this legendary skin would be on, I think depending on Springtrap's power, it could easily fit on him very well. If licensed characters were able to get legendary skins, I would easily say Demogorgon though, but sadly that's not possible. So it would have to be probably a Springtrap skin. Okay. So second is another favorite of mine, which is Vanny. She's also a fan favorite for many people besides myself. Many fans of Security Breach were also disappointed with her lack of inclusion in the game, especially as it seems that Vanny's story ends with Security Breach. So her becoming a killer in the realm of Dead by Daylight would be such a cool way to have more Vanny content in the series. I could see her working in the game as either two different killers, either as Legion or Skull Merchant. I think Legion would be the simplest way for her, as she pretty much just runs around already with a knife. But Skull Merchant I feel would also be very cool, especially if they were to somehow modify her drones to have designs such as the staff bot heads instead of the skulls. But between the two, I definitely do think that Legion would probably be the better choice of the two. Moving on up next, there is absolutely no universe where I do not see a Glitchtrap skin being a possibility. Yet another form of the infamous Yellow Rabbit, Glitchtrap's first appearance in FNAF Help Wanted is another fan favorite. And he even has enough potential, in my opinion, to be a killer of his own. Not, you know, that he would, of course. But I think Glitchtrap would work really nice as a cosmetic, I think, for Springtrap. Though I can see it being an issue that he's not like a physical being happening, so that wouldn't really make sense. There was this neat singularity concept I saw though that was like a mix of Glitchtrap and originality, giving him the body of singularity but hijacked by Glitchtrap, which I think is really cool. And of course Glitchtrap isn't a physical creature but rather a digital one, so I think that would probably be the most realistic way for him to be included. I think it'd be really funny if we can have a skin of like Glitchtrap hacking the singularity. I think that would be really cool. Even if Glitchtrap doesn't get a legendary skin though, I do think he'll get some sort of reference as a skin in some way. How that would happen, I don't know, but I do think Glitchtrap will get some sort of representation in this chapter. Alright, and for the last killer skin I think is definitely going to come in this game is the Mimic. The Mimic is a really good contender, I feel, for a skin we will likely get, with the only thing I believe to be stopping it from happening is the possibility of a second chapter. We know that Behavior has their schedules out for like the next 2 or 3 years, so unless Scott and Behavior have already worked out a deal for a second chapter, I think it's unlikely for there to be a second FNAF chapter anytime soon anyways. Nonetheless, I believe that the Mimic would be a perfect fit for the singularity, both being really advanced and malicious AIs that seem to have a thing for curving their arm. The Mimic is such a strong contender for the skin, I feel, as I was even worried about him initially being the killer for this chapter before the reveal, with the secret of the Mimic being so close to this chapter's release. Either way, a Mimic legendary skin for the singularity I think would be really sick. Okay, so now that we covered some of the more obvious picks, let's move on to some of the more out there skins I think that could go either way. These are ones I don't know for sure would happen, but I think they have a strong possibility of coming into the game. Scraptrap, officially just called Afton, is probably the first choice I would put here. I initially picked him as a definite pick, but it seems that Scraptrap has sort of been ignored in any FNAF media for years. The last reference I can recall of Scraptrap being officially recognized was in a FNAF coloring book years ago. I think that although many people want Scraptrap as a skin, I think Scott may choose to move on from this model as it source of a lot of ridicule for the character, and in some ways it feels as though it may have been retconned, with his appearance just being ignored for years. It's not really confirmed that he's retconned, but it's definitely a possibility with him just being flat out ignored. Either way, I think it would be really cool to have him as a legendary skin. As ugly as I think he is still a form of William Afton, and even though he is still the same William Afton as Springtrap in Dead by Daylight, I'm going to put him as a legendary skin, as he would need a complete model and animation change. He would definitely just be a skin for Springtrap, I believe. I don't really know any other killer he would fit as. Additionally, I would actually throw in Burntrap here as well. There's not much to be said about him, as we don't know much about him really, but I think he would also be a cool skin for Springtrap that would also require a model and animation change. I don't really think there's much stopping Burntrap from coming into the game other than he's not really a fan favorite. I feel like out of all the Springtraps, Burntrap is probably the most forgot about one, which is a little ironic considering he's the newest form of Springtrap we have in any game. Ennard is another cool character I think that can enter the fog. Ennard is really interesting as an animatronic in my opinion, and I feel like he would fit like bread and butter for the Unknown with his freaky, uncanny movements. The only issue I see it working out with the Unknown is potentially the UVX power looking weird on Ennard, as that's not really something he can do, but neither can the Mimic shoot at security cameras, as I said earlier, so either way, I think this would be such a cool concept, and I know many people do want Ennard in the game as he's a really freaky animatronic, and I think replacing the Unknown's voice lines with some of the animatronics from Sister Location would be a cool touch as well. And for the Mori, I think the only issue I could see with that being the tentacles. Obviously, Ennard doesn't have tentacles, but they can always adjust it to be like wires or something, or they can just do a new Mori entirely with the visceral skins. Foxy Blight is one of the most requested skins I've seen, actually, but if you're following Scott's opinion on the portrayal of the original animatronics, then we can still get a Foxy. It just won't be the Five Nights at Freddy's 1 Foxy. I believe Nightmare Foxy and especially Grim Foxy would work really well on Blight. I think Grim Foxy would be probably the better choice here, as I think he just has a really cool design and he's also very orange like the Blight. He also runs very fast, which, you know, the Blight does as well. This skin would likely require a lot of animation changes, as I think him injecting himself with the Blight serum would be kind of weird, but, you know, who knows? I think there are ways to make this work, and I really hope it does, because I would love to play as the Blight as some sort of form of Foxy. I've seen the concepts for a Foxy Blight, and I just think it works really well. And the last one here is a little unlikely, but I still think it is somewhat possible, and that is Funtime Freddy. Funtime Freddy is one of those I know Behavior and Scott would like to add, I feel, but would likely run into a lot of issues. First of all, if Funtime Freddy is added, him being voiced by Kellen Goff would be such a treat. Additionally, I think his role would be best suited as the twins. The main issue I think that would come from this would be how his power would work mechanically, as to my knowledge, killer powers are really hard for behavior to change, almost impossible, except for the appearance of characters after the Houndmaster. So this would be a feat to add in the game for behavior. That being said, I think this skin would do so well that behavior would probably figure out a way to make it work. So for me, it's a 50-50. If it wasn't for that reason, I would likely put this one as a guaranteed skin, as Funtime Freddy is definitely a fan favorite. Also, it would be nice to have some sort of Freddy Fazbear representation, with this chapter being a chapter called Five Nights at Freddy's, and I think Funtime Freddy would probably be the best suited role for that. Okay, so we've gone over the likely characters and the ones with a decent shot, so let's move on to what I call the copium tier list. These are characters I think that could come in and would be a cool concept, but I still have my doubts for various reasons. The Blob, in my opinion, would be a cool Dredge skin. The Dredge could easily take the form of the Blob or even a skin inspired by it. I think this one is pretty straightforward. I think it would work. The power is a bit of a stretch, as these are none of the things the Blob is really capable of doing, teleporting and whatever you would call the Nightfall, but I feel like it's not entirely something we can just write off. I would also put Molten Freddy on this character as well, as I feel like the Blob and Molten Freddy are basically the same design somewhat, so I think both of these characters could very well fit on the Dredge. Dreadbear as a Doctor skin I feel like would be a lot of fun, as Dreadbear, obviously being inspired by Frankenstein, would wield powers like electricity very nicely. Other than that, it kind of ends here. Hallucinations isn't really something Dreadbear himself is known for, and he would likely have to wield some sort of beating stick like Doctor does, which I think would look really funny on Dreadbear. Also, to be honest, not many people care about Dreadbear, so it's likely not going to happen for that reason alone. Either way, it's a fun idea, and I like Dreadbear, so I wanted to bring it up. Mangle is a character I would love to see get some sort of representation in Dead by Daylight, with her being a fan favorite character as well, and 100% my favorite character. I actually have a tattoo of both Mangle and Springtrap. I don't believe she's possessed by any of the missing children, so I think she could still work as a killer in the game. However, correct me if I'm wrong on that. It's honestly really hard for me to pick a specific killer for Mangle that could work one-to-one, however. I think the Dredge could possibly take on his appearance somewhat. I think they can also be featured as some sort of skin for the Unknown, but I don't think that would work really too well in my opinion, as you know, the Unknown is more humanoid and Mangle isn't. I think it'd be really cool if there was a way for her to work, but I think the odds are likely stacked against him. So I think Mangle is one of those characters I think is not going to come into this chapter, but it's still possible. Okay, the last two here are mostly just for fun, but I love to throw them out because I think they would be really cool nonetheless. These are probably not going to happen with almost a 99% certainty, but I'd still love to bring them up anyways. Nightmare I think would be a really neat skin for the Wraith. Only thing I think would go against this is that it would have to be an entire animation and power change, which I think would require more effort than not to happen. But the idea of Nightmare going invisible and reappearing on survivors before snatching them up, in my opinion, would be really cool. Plus, Nightmare would be scary as an animatronic to go against in DBD anyways. I always thought Nightmare was probably one of the scariest looking animatronics, but I just think his body is just so different from, like, say, the Wraith that I think it would be really hard to make it work. But yeah, I would love to still see happen in some way or form. And the last one here I think could probably work a little bit better than Nightmare, and that's Montgomery Gator. Montgomery Gator is the final legendary skin suggestion I have for this video, and I think he would be a skin featured best for the Oni. I think his body could go very well over the Oni, and I think his weapon could be his bass guitar instead of the Oni's sword. I think the Oni's power being based on rage is extremely fitting for Monty too, a character known to be really angry. However, I don't know if Monty would be granted his own skin just from a lack of demand, as I don't really see any suggestions for him, except me. I love the silly gator from Security Breach, so I wanted to mention it in this video. Well, that's pretty much it, guys. This was my video covering all the legendaries I think that could come into this chapter as killers. I'm really hopeful we get a bunch of really cool legendary skins from this chapter that feature more than just alternative versions of William, but shine some light on the other scary creatures that are from the series. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. If you guys did, leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you're new for more videos like this. I'm working on several projects I think that you guys are really going to enjoy, just like this one. And I finally just started working on some non-FNAF related DBD videos on some topics I think that would be really fun to cover, so stick around for those. But yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and peace out.